Once upon a time, in a tall, shiny city filled with even taller, shinier buildings, lived a young man named Mark. Mark wasn't like the other people rushing around. He wasn't loud or boisterous. He was quiet, thoughtful, and a really hard worker. He worked at Globocorp, a huge company that made, well, lots of things. Mark loved his job. He was really good at solving tricky problems. He could untangle the most confusing messes with his brain. He knew all the ins and outs of the company's computers and gadgets. But because he was so quiet, some people at Globocorp didn't notice how smart he was. They just thought he was, well, quiet. Little did they know, Mark's quietness was his superpower. He listened closely and thought deeply before he spoke, making his ideas extra brilliant. Every day, Mark would come to work ready to tackle the toughest challenges. When the computers crashed, everyone panicked, but Mark calmly found the fix. When a new machine wouldn't work, other engineers scratched their heads, but Mark quietly tinkered until it hummed like new. He was like a secret weapon for Globocorp. The other workers would often shout out ideas during meetings, trying to be the loudest and get noticed. Mark, however, would sit quietly, listening and thinking. Then, when everyone else was out of ideas, he'd offer a simple, smart solution that made everyone say, "Wow, why didn't we think of that?" But because he said it so quietly, sometimes people didn't even realize it was his idea. It was a strange situation. He was solving the biggest problems, but no one seemed to notice him. Mr. Stern, Mark's boss, was a loud, booming man who loved to hear himself talk. He believed that the best workers were the ones who were always chatting and sharing ideas, even if those ideas weren't very good. He thought Mark was a nice enough guy, but he just didn't understand him. One day, Mr. Stern called Mark into his office. "Mark," he said, his voice echoing in the small room, "you're a smart guy, no doubt about it, but I need you to be more of a team player. You need to speak up more. Share your thoughts. Be more outgoing." Mark felt his stomach twist into a knot. He wanted to share, but it was just so hard for him. Talking loudly and making small talk felt like climbing a mountain. He mumbled, "I'll try, Mr. Stern." Mark really did try to be more outgoing. He tried to laugh louder at Mr. Stern's jokes, even when they weren't funny. He tried to join in the water cooler gossip, even though he didn't really care about who was dating who. He even tried to speak up in meetings, but his voice would always get shaky, and his face would turn red. It was exhausting. One Tuesday, Globocorp was in big trouble. They were working on a new project, a super cool robot that could do all sorts of things, but it just wasn't working right. Everyone was stressed and arguing. Mark knew exactly what the problem was, and he had a simple solution in his head. But the meeting was so loud and chaotic, he just couldn't bring himself to speak up. He sat there, feeling smaller and smaller, as the robot project seemed doomed. Just as the meeting was ending, and everyone was about to give up, a coworker named Sarah suddenly spoke up. "Wait," she exclaimed. "I think I have an idea." Sarah then explained the very solution that had been swirling around in Mark's head. She said it loudly and confidently, and everyone cheered. "That's it," Mr. Stern boomed. "Sarah, you've saved the day." Mark felt a pang of disappointment. It wasn't that he was angry at Sarah. He was just frustrated with himself. He knew he should have spoken up, but he couldn't. Now, someone else was getting the credit for his idea. Later that day, Mr. Stern patted Sarah on the back and said, "See, Mark? That's what I'm talking about. Being a team player." Mark just nodded sadly. The next day, Mr. Stern called Mark into his office again. This time, his voice wasn't booming. It was strangely quiet. "Mark," he said, avoiding eye contact, "I'm sorry to say this, but we're going to have to let you go." Mark's heart sank. "Let me go," he whispered. "You're just not a good fit for Globocorp," Mr. Stern explained. "We need people who are more vocal, people who can share their ideas openly. You're just too quiet." Mark felt like the wind had been knocked out of him. He gathered his things, his head spinning. As he walked out of Globocorp for the last time, he felt a wave of sadness wash over him. He felt lost and confused. Was he really not good enough? Was being quiet a bad thing? He didn't know what he was going to do. His future felt very uncertain. When Mark told his family and friends what happened, they were shocked. "That's ridiculous," his mom said. "You're one of the smartest people I know." His best friend, Alex, added, "Don't let that get you down, Mark. You're amazing." Their words helped Mark feel a little better. He started to think about all the times he had solved problems at Globocorp, all the clever ideas he had come up with. Maybe, just maybe, he was good enough. He remembered the money he had saved up over the years. An idea sparked in his mind. What if he started his own company? A company where quiet people were valued? With newfound determination, Mark decided to take a chance. He would call it Quiet Solutions. Quiet Solutions was different from Globocorp. Mark created a place where everyone felt comfortable sharing their ideas, whether they whispered them or shouted them. He had brainstorming sessions where people could write down their thoughts anonymously, so no one felt pressured to speak up in front of others. He made sure everyone knew that listening was just as important as talking. His team was made up of all sorts of people. Some were loud and energetic, and some were quiet and thoughtful, just like him. But they all had one thing in common. They were all smart and creative. And because they felt valued and respected, they came up with amazing solutions for their clients. Quiet Solutions quickly became known as the company that could solve the unsolvable problems. Word about Quiet Solutions spread like wildfire. More and more companies wanted their help. Mark hired more people, always making sure to create a welcoming and inclusive environment. Quiet Solutions was growing fast. They moved into a bigger office and then even bigger one. Meanwhile, back at Globocorp, things weren't going so well. They had lost some important clients, and their new ideas weren't very good. The robot project, which Sarah had supposedly saved, was still having problems. It turned out that Sarah hadn't really understood Mark's solution. She had just repeated the words. Globocorp was struggling, and everyone was starting to worry. Quiet Solutions was quickly becoming the go-to company, leaving Globocorp in the dust. Mr. Stern was pacing back and forth in his office, his face red with worry. Globocorp was losing money faster than he could count it. The board of directors was breathing down his neck, demanding answers. He couldn't sleep at night, tossing and turning, wondering what he was going to do. He tried to come up with new ideas, but nothing seemed to work. He even tried to copy some of the ideas from Quiet Solutions, but they just didn't have the same magic. The atmosphere at Globocorp was tense and stressful. People were arguing and blaming each other. Mr. Stern realized he had made a mistake. He had focused too much on loud voices and not enough on smart ideas. He missed Mark, the quiet guy who always seemed to have the answers. But it was too late now, wasn't it? Mark was reading the news one morning when he saw an article about Globocorp's struggles. He felt a pang of sympathy for the people who worked there. He knew many of them were good people just stuck in a bad situation. Then, an idea popped into his head. Quiet Solutions was doing so well. They had more than enough money. What if he bought Globocorp? He could change the company culture, make it a better place to work, and help all those people who were struggling. It would be a big challenge, but Mark knew he could do it. He had already proven that quiet people could be successful. Now, he wanted to prove that a company that valued everyone could be successful too. He smiled. It was time to make a move. A few weeks later, Mr. Stern received a letter from a law firm representing Quiet Solutions. He opened it with trembling hands. The letter stated that Quiet Solutions was offering to buy Globocorp. Mr. Stern couldn't believe his eyes. He reread the letter several times, thinking it must be a mistake. He picked up the phone and called the law firm, his voice shaking. "There must be some mistake," he stammered. "Quiet Solutions wants to buy Globocorp?" The lawyer on the other end confirmed that it was indeed true. Mr. Stern sank back into his chair, stunned. The quiet guy he had fired for not being a good fit now wanted to take over his company. He couldn't imagine anything more embarrassing. How could this have happened? There were a lot of meetings, a lot of paperwork, and a lot of discussions. Mr. Stern tried to negotiate a better deal, but Mark was firm. He knew Globocorp was in trouble, and he wasn't going to overpay. Finally, Mr. Stern had no choice. He agreed to the sale. The day the deal was finalized, Mark walked into Globocorp as the new owner. People stared at him in disbelief. The quiet guy who had been fired for being too quiet was now in charge. Mr. Stern stood there, looking defeated. Mark simply nodded politely and walked past him, a small smile playing on his lips. He had a company to run and a lot of changes to make. It was time to turn Globocorp into a place where everyone could thrive, no matter how loud or quiet they were. Mark knew that the most important thing was to change the way people thought about each other. He held a company-wide meeting and spoke to everyone, his voice still quiet but now filled with confidence. "I know things haven't been easy here," he said, "but I believe that everyone has something valuable to offer, no matter how quiet they are." He announced new policies that encouraged people to share their ideas in different ways. Online forums, suggestion boxes, and small group discussions. He made it clear that listening was just as important as talking. He wanted everyone to feel safe and respected. He wanted Globocorp to be a place where people were judged by their ideas, not by how loud they were. The change wouldn't happen overnight, but Mark was determined to make it work. Mark also had a plan for Sarah. He knew she hadn't meant to hurt him, but he also knew she hadn't acted fairly. So he offered her a job as his assistant. Sarah was surprised, but she accepted. Mark wanted to teach her about the importance of giving credit where credit is due and of listening to everyone, not just the loudest voices. He showed her how to create a supportive environment where everyone felt comfortable sharing their ideas. He believed that everyone deserved a second chance, and he wanted to help Sarah become a better person. He hoped that by working closely with him, she would learn the value of honesty and respect. It wasn't about punishing her. It was about helping her grow. Mark wanted to make sure everyone at Globocorp understood that being quiet didn't mean you didn't have great ideas. He put up posters with slogans like, "Quiet voices, powerful ideas, and listen first, speak second." He made sure that the suggestion boxes were emptied regularly and that the online forums were monitored for good ideas. He also started a program where employees could anonymously submit ideas for new products or services. If their idea was chosen, they would receive a bonus and be recognized for their contribution, even if they didn't want to reveal their identity. Mark wanted to create a culture where everyone felt empowered to share their thoughts, no matter how shy or reserved they were. He knew that the best ideas often came from unexpected places. Slowly but surely, things started to change at Globocorp. People were smiling more. They were collaborating better. They were actually listening to each other. The atmosphere was lighter and more positive. And, most importantly, the ideas started flowing again. New products were developed, old problems were solved, and clients started coming back. Globocorp was making money again. The board of directors was happy, the employees were happy, and even Mr. Stern was starting to crack a smile, though he tried to hide it. Mark had proven that a company that valued everyone, loud or quiet, could be successful. Globocorp was finally living up to its potential. It had become a truly great place to work. Mr. Stern watched all of this unfold with a mixture of awe and regret. He saw how much happier the employees were, how much better the company was doing, and how much Mark had accomplished. He finally understood that he had been wrong all along. Being quiet wasn't a weakness. It was a strength. Mark's quietness allowed him to listen, to think, and to come up with brilliant ideas that others had missed. He realized that he had made a terrible mistake when he fired Mark. He had judged him based on his personality instead of his abilities. He had prioritized loudness over intelligence. And he had almost ruined Globocorp because of it. He felt ashamed of himself. He knew he needed to apologize. But how could he ever face Mark again? One day, Mr. Stern found the courage to knock on Mark's office door. Mark invited him in. Mr. Stern apologized, his voice trembling with sincerity. He told Mark how wrong he had been and how much he admired what Mark had accomplished. Mark listened quietly, then smiled. "I forgive you, Mr. Stern," he said. "Everyone makes mistakes." Then he offered Mr. Stern a job. "I think you could be a great help in welcoming new employees and making them feel comfortable," Mark explained. "You have a lot of experience, and you know what it's like to feel out of place." Mr. Stern was touched by Mark's generosity. He accepted the job, determined to make amends for his past mistakes and help build a better Globocorp. And so, Mark's story became a legend at Globocorp. It was a story about how being yourself is always the best thing you can be. It was a story about how believing in your ideas is more important than shouting them from the rooftops. And it was a story about how even the quietest person can achieve great things if they are given a chance. Mark proved that you don't have to change who you are to be successful. You don't have to be loud to be heard. You just have to be smart, be kind, and believe in yourself. And sometimes, the greatest strength comes from being quiet enough to listen. The end. So remember, next time you're in a group, take a moment to listen to everyone, not just the people who are talking the loudest. You never know where the next great idea might come from. It might come from the quiet person in the corner, the one who's been listening and thinking all along. Because sometimes the quietest people have the loudest ideas. And sometimes the people who are overlooked are the ones who are destined to do the greatest things. Mark's story is a reminder that everyone has value, and that we should always be open to hearing what they have to say, no matter how quietly they say it. Be kind, be patient, and be open-minded. You might just be surprised by what you discover.